right, it's 8 p.m., so I think we should get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session. I think tonight's session is very special because if there's one person who believes in financial freedom, it's me. I think it's a journey that all of us should know about as we start, working, earning income. I think even before you start earning, we all need to know about financial freedom and the possibilities that are available to us. So tonight I decided to invite Patrick. I think he's one of the few people that I know about in South Africa that have managed to reach financial independence. I know you haven't retired, Patrick, so the RE is silent in this case. So welcome, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me, Es. Good to be here.
So Patrick is a blogger. He runs the Investor Challenge blog, and he does many other things. Patrick, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. So I'm Patrick. I'm 42. I live in Johannesburg with my wife. I've got one son. I've been working in IT for most of my life. Recently switched from IT. I now work in the drone field, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I've been running the blog now since, I think, 2013. I don't blog as much as I used to. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to the last while.
So for everyone that's not too familiar, financial independence, retire early, FIRE, FIRE, stands for financial independence, retire early. And it was really a concept that was sort of started in America by Mr. Money Mustache. The concept of, you don't have to wait for retirement in order for you to enjoy your money. It was centered around the concept of retirement is not an age but a number, that you can have enough money invested so that your investment income can cover your monthly expenses. So you essentially don't have to work if you don't want to. Working is therefore a choice because you're not solely reliant on your salary, but you have other income sources. So, Patrick, I think when I started this journey, I wanted to find people in South Africa that were on this journey. Because a lot of the people I was reading about were from America, and I wanted, to bring it back to South Africa in a local context and just understand who has managed to do it and how did they do it. And I wanted someone that, I could relate to, and I think your story is relatable. Can you please just share with us, how you started your journey? Because, you didn't have a lot of money when you started, That's why I wanted to bring you on the show because you're so relatable in how you started. Can you take us through your journey?
Sure. Look, I started with a blank slate. I was fortunate I didn't start with any debt. But I got my first job in 2001 and I earned very little. I think it was 7,000 Rand, which at the time was enough for me to survive on. And yeah, I was a software developer. But one of the things I always tried to do was, I'd seen people around me that didn't have jobs, that never had work. So I'd always try to save half my salary. I don't know why I chose half. I just thought, okay, great, save half your salary. If you work for 3 months and then you're out of a job for 3 months, you can survive like that. So I just started doing that. And in your first couple of years, your salary grows quite nicely. I think mine went up to 11, and 2 years later, it was nearly double at 13 and a half. But the whole time along, I made a goal. I said, look, let's first save the first 50% of your salary. And that's what I did. And I was quite fortunate. After a few years, I left my full-time job and I got a consultancy or contracting post at least, which gave me another bit of a bump in the salary. But I just kept living the same way. So I didn't increase my spending just because there's more money coming in. So I lived the same way I was living basically if I was earning 7,000 Rand a month. And I kept saving the first 50% of my salary. Now, I did most things the wrong way. I've got a blog post I call "A Short History of Investing Really Badly," which is worth reading. I made lots of mistakes. for 5 years, I just saved cash. I had cash in a bank account. I don't think it earned any interest. In fact, I think I paid bank charges on that money. But at least I was saving, and I was saving a huge portion of my salary. Later on, I tried to copy what my grandmother did, and she started buying properties and renting them out. And she never earned a lot of money. She was a music teacher, so she basically just scraped by. But she, towards the end of her working career, she had 6 houses, and she lived on the rent from those 6 houses. So I thought that must be the way to do it. I'm going to go and invest in property. So I bought a townhouse. I was living in the first one. I bought another one to rent out, and then I eventually bought a third one. But what I didn't do was I didn't do the maths, and I didn't see that my expenses from running the properties was actually eating up all the income. If you took expenses and the interest, there was no income at all. So I looked around. I tried to find out, what is a better way to deal with all this money. I got sucked in by the advertising of the unit trusts. You always see unit trust adverts. They've always got very wealthy people in flash cars, and they work in big, shiny buildings. So I decided to buy some unit trusts, which did relatively well. They did much better than property. But what I didn't work out was how much money I was actually giving to these unit trust managers. And I think at that stage it was about 1.7%. Now, an expense of 1.7% doesn't seem like a lot, when you've got, let's say, 100,000 Rand, you're spending 1,700 a year in costs. But the problem is these expenses, they sort of accumulate. And I worked out after a while that, if I do this for another 40 years, I'm going to give my unit trust manager more money than I'm going to keep for myself. And that's when I came across the Mr. Money Mustache forum. And there's another great forum called the Bogleheads. And I started learning about index investing. And to me, this really started making sense. And I started to find out that, the unit trust managers take a large amount of your money, but 80% of them actually lose out to the index. So the index is like the whole basket of shares in the share market. And that's what I started doing then. I got out of property. I got out of unit trusts. I got out of money in the bank account, and I just started putting all my money into index funds. And I literally just kept doing that. Now, the great thing about index funds is you don't need to be smart. You don't need to choose a single share, which I also tried and failed miserably at. You don't even need to choose the best unit trust manager. You're literally just buying the entire investable market. The maths works out quite interestingly. If you save and invest 50% of your salary, it only takes 17 years, and your investments are going to basically replace that amount of money that you're living on. And for me, it worked out to be almost exactly that. I started working in 2001, and it was about 2017, 2018, where I had enough money that I could live purely off my investments, which is great.
So take us through, this concept of, I think everyone, as you've said, as your life changed, you sort of didn't allow lifestyle creep to get in. You still kept your lifestyle the same. Just take us through, the idea of it's not the expenses, but your savings rate. I think a lot of us get that idea wrong. Just take us through that.
So, everyone thinks that to be financially independent, you've got to be really wealthy. You've got to have a very high salary so that you can save enough of it to sort of be free. But the maths actually doesn't work out like that. If you earn 20,000 a month and you can save 10,000 a month, it's going to take you 17 years, and your investments will generate 10,000 a month. If you earn 40,000 a month and your expenses are 20,000 a month, it's still going to take you 17 years, and your investments are going to generate that 20,000 a month that you need. So the way it works out is it doesn't matter what you earn, but it matters what you save. And the numbers are quite interesting. So, a typical person might save 10% of their salary every month, and they'll do that as a rule. But if you're only saving 10% of your salary, it's going to take you 53 years to generate enough income from your investments. But the nice thing is, if you save more, it also means you're living on more. So somebody who, might have been saving 10% of their salary, that means they were spending 90%. So if you can save 20% of your salary, it means you found a way now to live on 80% of your income. And the time really drops significantly. So going from 10%, you'd have to work for 53 years, to 20% is only 30, 37, 38 years. When you get to 30%, you're only working 29 years. And like I said earlier, somebody who saves 50% of their salary, your working career only literally needs to be 17 years long. And it's not only because you've saved much more money, that you've invested much more money, but it's also because you've learned to live on a lot less money. So those two things kind of work together. It's like a double-edged sword almost, and it really reduces the amount of time it takes to reach your magic number, which is the amount of money you need to generate your income.
Absolutely. It's not what you earn, it's how much you save.
Exactly,
just take us through your investment strategy. I know you love your index funds.
Yeah.
I just want us to touch on that.
So what I believe you must buy as much of the market as cheaply as possible. So, there's a whole range of index funds. In the beginning, before I had these thoughts, I used to think, okay, well, I've tried unit trust, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find the best index fund out there. And I looked on the JSE and I checked which index fund was the best performer over 5 years. And it turned out to be the Satrix Indy. And I thought, okay, great. Well, since that one's been the best in the past 5 years, surely it's going to be the best in the next 5 years. And there's always the fine print on the adverts that says past performance isn't an indicator of future performance. Very true in this case again. So you can't actually pick something like that. So a better bet than buying the Satrix Indy would have been buying the JSE All Share Index. So that would mean now I'm not choosing the industrial shares only, I'm choosing the whole of the South African market. But by doing that, I'm not only saying, I'm not saying I'm not buying the whole market here. All I'm doing is I'm buying the whole South African market. And by buying the South African market, it's actually me saying, you know what, South Africa is going to outperform the whole of the world. And, we can't say that. Even if we had sort of the best government around and they were doing all the right things, they might still not be the best in the whole world. They might just have, natural disasters or something that might affect things. So the idea is to go bigger than that and to say, okay, well, I could try and pick an economy. I could say maybe South Korea is going to do really well, or United States is going to do really well. But the whole thing you need to realize is that nobody is smart enough to predict anything like that. There's too many variables involved. Even the world's experts who study stock markets sort of 24 hours a day, well, not 24 hours, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, they get these things wrong. And we know they get it wrong because there's a scorecard. There's a whole group of people that keep track of index funds and keep track of unit trusts, managers, which are these very smart guys. And it turns out that 80% of the people who try and pick shares or pick economies or pick different indexes to go into lose out to the overall market. So if you want to be in the top 20% of investors, the only thing you can literally do is to invest in the whole world. And to invest in the whole world, you can do it in a number of different ways. If you're on the South African Stock Exchange, there's a couple of all-world funds on the JSE. But they're generally a little bit more expensive than the ones you can get overseas. I think the cheapest one we've got on the JSE is about 0.28%, which isn't a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot. But if you go to the international markets, you can find all world funds that are at 0.13, 0.14%. So what I do is I buy, in my after-tax account, I buy something called the Vanguard All World Index. And that means that I've invested in practically every single company in the investable world. I think there's 7,000 or 8,000 different companies inside that index. In my tax-free savings account, which means I have to buy in South Africa, I buy the closest fund to it. And there's a fund now that is a wrapper for it. It's the core shares. I can't actually think of the name. I haven't bought my my allotment yet. But before that, it was the Satrix All World Index. So yeah, that's all I'm basically doing. I'm looking for the cheapest index that invests in the most of the world.
So someone actually asked, now that I think CoreShare has introduced the total world,
Yes.
Are you going to shift from your Vanguard to the CoreShare?
Okay, so Vanguard
ETF?
is in an American index. So the CoreShares All World is actually a wrapper of a Vanguard fund. So I'm not going to switch from my Vanguard All World because I like to keep my money based in a currency other than Rand, and I can explain that later if you like. But in my tax-free savings account, I'm going to switch from Satrix to the Core Shares Fund because it's slightly cheaper and it buys more of the world. So yes, very good question.
So how many ETFs in total do you hold?
So at the moment, I've got 3. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated. So I've got a tax-free savings account. And literally, if you're listening to this and you don't have a tax-free savings account, if you take one thing out of this conversation, it's to get a tax-free savings account. It's the best gift the government has given us in decades. So in my tax-free savings account, which I've got with Easy Equities, I've got the Satrix All World Index. So that's the only one I've got there. But what I'm going to do now is with my new allocation, since Core Shares has just released their new fund and it's better and cheaper, is I'm going to start putting everything into Core Shares from there on. I haven't decided yet if I'll move everything from Satrix into Core Shares. I'll have to do the maths and see if it's worth spending the transaction fees to convert from one to the other. But I might. If it works out cheap enough and I'm going to keep the fund for long enough, I might do that. And then offshore, in my offshore investment account, which is all my non-tax-free money, I hold 2, which are virtually the same. The one is the Vanguard All World Index, and it's based in Ireland. And the other is the Vanguard All World Index, and it's based in the US. Both of them are based in dollars, so there's no difference there. The only difference is that if I die and I've got more than around about $200,000 in an American account, the American government is going to keep a portion of my money, or at least more of a portion than the South African government would, whereas the Irish government isn't going to keep any. So I try and keep around about 200,000 in America, and everything else goes into my Irish account. But all in all, if you look at all the different ETFs, all the different index funds, they're all just basically different versions of the same thing. They're the cheapest all-world fund you can get anyway.
Thank you for sharing that. So regarding just take us through, because I think there's a lot of us that have started, investing offshore. And I like what you said around the 200,000 limit. If you can just expand on that further.
Okay, so in America, if you've got more than $60,000, the American government is going to keep a portion of your money when you die. It's called an estate duty. But now estate duties happen all over the show. There's also estate duties in South Africa. When you die one day and if you've got a lot of money, the government's going to keep 20% of the amount over 3.5 million, I think. But if you invest in Ireland, the Irish government won't keep any of your money, but the South African government is still going to take it. So the reason I worked out the 200,000 is that if you've got $200,000 in America and you die, the American government's going to keep about 20%, but that's the same amount that the South African government would have kept. So up to that amount, things are equal, because if you only paid the American government 15%, the South African government's going to want the extra 5%. Not something you really need to worry about until you've got lots of money, or if you're going to die. In theory, you could keep everything in America and move it all, if you fall ill or something, but unfortunately, we can't predict things like being hit by a bus or things like that. So the safe amount to keep in America is about $200,000.
So now I'm just thinking, as someone who, who's listening to this, I'm new, I've just started working. I'm interested in going the financial freedom route. What are some of the things that I need to look out for? What are the 4 key things that I should consider?
Okay, let's think of a few different things. As everyone can tell, this isn't a scripted conversation. We're sort of making it up as we go along. Okay, so the first thing to do is get a tax-free savings account. And in fact, if you can get one sooner than when you start working, it's worth getting one sooner. Because this is the only investment account that's going to grow without having any tax penalties at any point in time. They started, when did they start? About 6-7 years ago. So I immediately opened up one for myself, but I also opened up one for my son. So when he turns 18, he's getting a very, very nice head start on things. But you're only allowed to contribute $36,000 a year. And if you don't, let's say this year you only managed to put 10,000 in, you can't go and put in the leftover 26,000 next year. So start your tax-free savings account, do whatever you can to max it out as much as possible. So that's 3,000 a month that you're allowed to put into it. Any way you can put that 3,000 Rand a month in and just leave it in is the best thing you can do. And you should leave it in as long as possible, because the tax-free growth will compound, and you basically say this is the last money you're ever going to spend. You try and keep it tax-free for as long as possible. Anyway, that's the tax-free savings account. That is my first recommendation for every single person to do. What else do you need to do? You need to try and keep investment costs low. So I used to be with Absa stockbrokers at one point in time, and they were relatively good. They said, okay, if you trade 5 times a year, you've got no monthly costs, and that's fine, because I bought shares every month. But they eventually added new types of costs, and it worked out that they weren't going to be the cheapest. And then Easy Equities came along and said, no, you can keep your account for free, and we'll only charge you 0.25% for a transaction, which is lower than Absa at 0.4. So I started using them, and I still use them. I think they're the best tax-free savings account in the country at the moment. But that would be my other suggestion, is keep your costs low. A lot of people are going to try and tempt you with crazy ideas like buy Bitcoin or blueberry trees, or all sorts of weird things like that. And you need to stay as far away from most people's advice as possible. You need to make sure you understand exactly what's going on. So a lot of people have asked me, do you have any Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies like that? And I don't. I've missed out on making a lot of money, but I've also missed out on losing a lot of money recently. But that's not the real reason. The reason I don't own anything like Bitcoin or anything like that is because there's a fundamental difference between investing and speculating. So when you invest, you're basically putting your money into something that generates value. So, if you've bought a house and you're renting it out, that house is actually generating something more is coming in. If you own a caravan that sells food on the side of the road, you put your money into that and it generates something. There's something that's coming in. And it's the same thing. If you own an index fund, you basically own the companies that are sitting in that index fund in a very small proportion. And they make money, and they make profits, and the profits get paid back to you. So they generate value. Cryptocurrency to me is like gold. The reason somebody would buy gold is because they think, maybe in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years time, somebody's going to think this gold is worth more than it currently is at the moment, and they'll buy it from you for more. But gold doesn't do anything. It sort of sits, it sits in the safe, and it gathers dust. Maybe you spend some money on guarding it or something like that, but it just sits there. It doesn't generate any value. And, I think of crypto as something quite similar. It kind of just sits there. It doesn't generate any value. There's no real interest from it. You're just hoping that one day somebody's going to buy it for you for more. And so that's speculating. You're basically taking a bet on the price going up. But I don't believe in speculating, so I don't do it in anything. I don't own gold. I don't own cryptocurrency. I don't own anything that doesn't generate any value, which is fine. It's maybe a bit boring. Some people do like to keep a little bit of the money to play with, but I don't. I like the boring way of building wealth. It starts out slow and steady, but when things compound, they sort of increase exponentially. So, I reached a point, maybe this is a bit of a sidetrack. So to know when you've got enough money that you never need to work, you just need to do a quick bit of multiplication. If you've got 300 times your monthly expenses, you've got enough money to never need to work again. So if your monthly expenses are 10,000 a month, you need to have 3 million Rand and you never need to work again. And if your monthly expenses are 20,000 a month, you need 6 million Rand. And if it's 40,000 a month, you need 12 million Rand. So the interesting thing about building up a big investment account is it starts off really, really slowly. And if you go and Google Warren Buffett's net worth over time, and he's probably the world's best investor, you'll see it looks like he's got virtually no money, virtually no money, virtually no money. But then he gets to his 50s, 60s and it explodes. His investment value just rockets up. And that's actually how it happens with compound interest. So, I mean, it took me 17 years to get to 300 times my monthly expenses. So it felt like it's really slow, steady. Things were growing slowly, slowly, slowly. But it only took me another 4 years, and I went from 300 times to 600 times. I doubled my investment accounts. You know, it might be 5 years. So things really do increase quite quickly. And that's the one thing you really do need to know is just have patience and just stick with the plan and just put your money in every month. Don't worry about what the numbers are doing. You know, if things go up and things go down, really don't worry about it. When the market's down, you know, I try and invest every month. And some months the shares are expensive and I might be able to get, let's say, for instance, 50 shares. But some months there's been a crash and I might be able to get now 70 shares. And over time, these ups and downs in the prices will actually let you buy more for the same amount of money. So yeah, that's a few of my tips. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but maybe we carry on the conversation. And if anything else pops up, I'll let you know.
It's about, being consistent with your investments, and like you said, over time they just, grow. Take me through the mental side, the mental aspect of it, because I think, where there's a human element to all of this. There's that behavioral aspect and the emotional aspect of it.
Yeah.
How did you sort of keep going, knowing that, this month might be better than the next? Emergencies happen.
They do. Yeah, look, I mean, I do have an emergency fund. It's about 3 months, 3 months of my expenses. So I do keep that aside. But you're right, the psychology is a big thing. So what most people tend to do is when prices are going up, they think, oh, I must buy more of this, and they buy more. But when prices are going down, especially when there's a crash, people get scared and they try and sell, which is the exact opposite thing to what you should be doing. Stock markets do go up and down. And last year, when COVID came around, I think we dropped about 30%. I was looking at, I think at one stage I was down about 20 years living expenses. But now, if I'd sold, I would have locked in those losses, and I would have literally lost that money. But because I didn't sell, I just sort of watched things go up and down. They've come back up to where they were, and they've exceeded it. So those few months where I was fortunate enough to still be earning a salary meant that I was actually able to invest more than I normally would have. And crashes actually, if you stick around and you keep buying, you actually end up much better off than when you started. Now, this is obviously a crash of the whole world, and the people that pick shares or pick unit trusts and that, you could potentially have a crash which you don't recover from. So, if somebody bought, I don't know, one-time airlines a while ago and they crashed, they've never come back. So then you've tried to pick a share and you picked the wrong one. So that would be a bad thing to do. People who invested in Zimbabwe in the 90s when they were still doing really well, they've lost their money and they've never come back. But if you invest in the whole world, the world will recover. The stock market will go up. It will break records. It will come to new highs. As long as you don't lock in your losses, you've just got to go along for the ride. What I tell most people to do is to buy and just never look at the prices again. So you look at the price when you buy, you say, okay, I'll put 15,000 Rand into that this month, and you just close your eyes and you buy 15,000. Doesn't matter what the price is when you buy it. And you don't care what the price is next week, next month, next year. You just keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. If it's an all-world fund, you're not going to lose. You might be down a year, you might be down for 5 years. But over time, and history has proven this, the stock market literally only goes up if you can hang in for long enough. And fortunately, I realized that, during the crash of the COVID crash, which was the biggest crash sort of I've been through, and as the price was going down, I wasn't getting upset. I was getting quite excited because it meant that next month I'd be able to buy even more. And the month after, I'd be able to buy even more. Fortunately, I'd been reading up a lot, and I knew kind of the rules in the background that things will recover regardless of what you think. There's smart people in the world. They're starting new companies. They are inventing new ways to do things. They're becoming more efficient. And all of these things over time just keep driving the stock market up and up and up and up. And there's never been any investment class better than the stock market. Investing in businesses has proven over and over again to be the best investment out. It's beaten property hands down. It's beaten commodities significantly. And that's what I do. I buy the whole world, and I just sit on the sidelines and I watch what things do, and things go up and down. And yeah, because of that, I beat 80% of all the unit trust managers. I beat 80% of all the sort of private investors who try and pick shares. And it's the easiest job in the world. I don't care what's going on in the world around me. I just buy and I wait.
Since you've sort of reached financial independence, do you still reinvest the dividends, or do you take a portion to cover some of your expenses? And because I know you're still working.
So the way I kind of see it, I mean, it doesn't really matter how you do it. At the moment, I reinvest all my dividends, but and in fact half of my salary. So you could look at it as if I'm living only on my investments and banking my whole salary, or I'm living on a portion of my salary, I'm banking my dividends and another portion of my salary. But in the end, the net effect is I can live only on my investments. So virtually 100% of my salary is going into my investment fund. But yeah, I do recommend that everyone else does reinvest their dividends, because when you reinvest your dividends, they add to the amount of shares you've got, which means that the next time dividends get paid out, you actually get more in dividends. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. It starts off really, really slowly. You get your first dividend check, and I think mine was like R3.05. Okay, great. I'm going to reinvest R3.05. But very quickly it goes, and you're getting a couple of R100 in dividends. And then you're getting a couple of R1,000 in dividends. With an index fund, you generally get dividends 4 times a year. And then I can remember my last dividend, which before the COVID crash, and I got like R70,000. I'm like, wow, this is like serious money, And you reinvest that, and again it builds up, and again you get more dividends out of that coming up. There was a bit of dividends dropping during COVID, but I'm expecting my biggest ever dividend check coming up now in June, and I think it's really exciting. To me, I kind of consider it's almost like free money. I'm getting paid for just owning a stock, which is a lot of fun.
Wow, I can't wait to get 70,000 Rand in dividend payments. So I see Vanguard paid us today, and I know
I did that.
you're definitely a Vanguard person.
Yeah, I'm going to go and have a look quickly and see if it's in my account. Yeah. Okay, my internet is giving me trouble, so I won't be able to check right now. I'll stay on the chat. I'll have a look afterwards. But yeah, that's the big one I'm waiting for. I only really get dividends from my Vanguard index funds. If anyone's interested, the reason I chose Vanguard is a really unique company. Most sort of ETF companies like your core shares and your Satrix and that, they're private companies or listed companies, so somebody owns them, which means their goal is to make a profit. Vanguard works differently. Vanguard, your index funds actually own the company. So when you own the index funds, you're also a part owner of Vanguard. And that means that if Vanguard had to make a profit, it would need to pay it out to the shareholders. But when you do that, they get charged taxes. So Vanguard actually has an incentive to run at cost. So they keep the costs as low as possible to ensure they don't make a profit, which means they don't need to pay a lot of money in taxes. And because of that, the shareholders are actually in control of Vanguard rather than having the company trying to get as much money as possible out of the shareholders. So very, very good company. It was started by a guy called Jack Bogle, who literally invented the index fund. He had a theory that fund managers for unit trusts and that were wasting their time because they get their choices wrong so often. And he said, if you just buy the index of the stock market, you're going to do better than these guys. And everyone laughed at him. And some people actually even started a bet, and somebody bet him $1 million that their index fund, that their unit trusts would beat Vanguard. And people have been losing over and over again. And I think he did cash that out just before he died, and he paid it over to charity. But yeah, there's no beating an index fund. Some people can do it over a year, some people can do it over 2 years or even 5 years. But give it enough time, and the index is going to beat you. And Jack Bogle knew this, and he started the company, which was then one of the smallest investment companies, and is now hugely sort of the biggest investment company the world has seen, and it runs at no profit, which is cool.
I've learned something new. I actually didn't know that. Thank you for that.
I've been around this space for a while. I'm showing my age, all 42 years now.
Listen, I think the thing that deters a lot of people about, fire is this idea of living frugally. Do you think you need to be frugal to reach financial independence?
Look, I don't think you need to be frugal in everything, but I think you need to pick your rewards. So I would say, in the big things, it helps to be frugal. So I bought my current car in 2006, and it was 2 years old then, and I'm still driving it, and it drives perfectly because I maintain it. But that car alone has saved me well over R1 million, maybe 2-3 million, depending on how people upgrade their cars. So that's a big ticket item. Try and be frugal on the big ticket item. The other big ticket item, obviously, is your house. If you want a really nice mansion, you got to be prepared to lose a lot of money, because not only because the house might cost you a lot of money every month. I mean, you could potentially pay it off, but there's something called the opportunity cost. So if your house costs 3 million and it's paid off, potentially you could be living in a 1 million rand house, and you could invest the other 2 million, and that investment would grow, and it would grow exponentially. So the opportunity cost is really big. So in those, I always recommend try and keep your main costs low, and it's those couple of big ones. There's a few other big ones. If you can keep those low, the rest doesn't matter as much. If you want to go and have a coffee every day, go and have a coffee every day. It's not going to make as much difference as driving a fancy car. But don't do everything. You can't have all the nice toys around, but you also can't live without anything nice. And so I like to pick my luxuries, and for me, my main luxury is travel. I like to travel. I don't know why. I just seem to enjoy going to new places. So that's my big luxury. So I'm fairly frugal in most other ways. I drive a cheap car, live in a low-cost apartment. I don't spend a lot of money on clothes. I don't spend a lot of money on gadgets anymore. I used to. I don't. But I spend a lot of money on travel. And before COVID hit, I was going overseas for a holiday at least once a year. And that would be to somewhere in Europe or South America. Sometimes I would go twice a year. And in fact, one year I went overseas 3 times a year. But that's my extravagance. And I set a budget for it, and I try and keep to the budget. So my travel budget was 2,000 a month. So I would go and spend 24,000 a year on foreign holidays. Sometimes it goes up a little bit more. On my 40th, we spent probably about 40,000 in the year on travel. But I budgeted for it, and it didn't really affect the fact that I was saving 50%, because obviously you can include some of your investment income as part of your income. So that's the way I do it. So I mean, if you are car mad, maybe you want that really nice car, but then you got to make sure that in all other aspects of your life, you're keeping things relatively frugal.
All right, I've come to the end of my questions. I think I'll open it up to the floor. Please, if you want to ask a question, just request for me to add you as a speaker. If you'd like to ask Patrick any other questions during this session, please just request for me to add you as a speaker, and then you can go ahead and ask your question.
I actually can't tell. I've never used this before, so I actually can't tell if there are any questions or any text questions or anything like that.
No, I'll let you know when someone requests to be a to be a speaker. Don't worry, I see it from my side because I'm able to see it. So I just, maybe before someone comes on, I just wanted to know from your side. You've reached the financial independence part. I know you haven't retired. Where to next? Financially for you, that must be such a huge burden off your shoulders.
Look, it is. I mean, that's the reason I did it. I didn't do it because I wanted to stop working or anything like that. So, I mean, it's called FIRE, it's financially independent, retired early. The FI bit is much more important than the RE bit. Having the ability to not need to work is basically everything for me. You know, it's the fact that if I had to lose my job tomorrow, I don't need to worry about it. It's great. And it also frees you up at work because you're not constantly working with this fear, you know, what happens if they start retrenching or things like that. And I think it's actually helped me do my best work. So, like I said, I was in IT, but I started getting a bit bored with it, and it meant I could take a massive risk and say, "Oh, let's go and see what good drones can do." And the only reason I could do that was because, you know, if it didn't work out and they got rid of the drone position, it wouldn't be a major problem for me. So they call it, at some point, they call it FU money. It's enough money to basically say I don't need to take what's coming from me without being able to do something about it. So, you know, when you've got a few years worth of your salary saved up, it gives you opportunity to take more risks. It gives you opportunity to stand up to people who are maybe trying to push you down at work or trying to get you to do things which you don't feel like is part of what you should be doing. You can stand up to bosses who are trying to take all the credit because, you know, if they fire you, you're probably going to be okay. So I do like having that.
Okay, so the first speaker that we're taking is Kamkhelo. Kamkhelo, do you just want to pose your question?
Hi, Ez. Good evening. Thank you. I have a question for Patrick. Good evening, Patrick.
Hi, nice to see you. Nice to hear you.
I'm gonna ask you about your financial journey and everything. I know you have achieved your financial independence. I'm more interested in your traveling. How many countries have you been to so far?
I don't know how much I've been to for holidays purely, but I'm sitting on about, I think at last count, I was about 42 countries. So I travel a lot for work, which mostly takes me into sort of different parts of Africa. But I think it's probably about half-half. So probably about half of them have been work and half of them have been pleasure. So where have I been? Interesting places. A lot of Europe. So Portugal, Spain, Croatia, Italy, a bunch of those places. I've been to Argentina and Chile in South America. I hired a camper van and went traveling through Chile and Argentina, which was a lot of fun. We drove across the Andes and climbed the most active volcano, which erupted about 3 weeks later. So our timing was good. What else was fun? I hired a boat in Croatia, a sailboat, because that's something I'd love to do one day, is go and sail around the world. And so we hired a boat for our 40th and went sailing around the Croatian islands. There's 1,000 of them, but we saw maybe about 10 or 12. What else has been fun? I got engaged in the Seychelles. We decided to take a holiday in the Seychelles that year. It was lovely. It's a relatively cost-effective holiday. Most of our holidays, we don't do sort of extravagance. We sort of stay in low-end places. I mean, I've stayed in a hotel in Germany where I could touch all four walls at once if I stretched. In the Seychelles, I was unfortunate enough to have the only hotel room on the island that only had frost glass windows. It was ridiculous. But fortunately, you spend most of your day outside, which is great. And Seychelles is cheap as long as you're not eating out. So that was fairly good. I got married in Paris, which was also fun. I got probably the coolest wedding photos ever. I'm sitting on an old Citroen 2CV with the Eiffel Tower in the background and things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And then I cycled across Austria, bought a couple of bicycles in the UK, flew to Germany, cycled to the beginning of Austria, and then cycled all the way across Austria on these little bicycles. That was a great holiday. A little bit of work, but loads and loads of fun. Fortunately, the route across Austria follows the Danube River. And when you're following a river, rivers flow downhill, so that helps you quite a lot. So yeah, it's been a good couple of trips. I do recommend putting away some money to go and travel. In fact, that's my plan for when I stop working. I would like to be nomadic for a while, so Patrick of no address. So either hiring a camper van or buying a camper van and sort of driving all around Europe and stuff like that, or buying a boat and just setting anchor at a different port or a different island every day. That's my dream. So that's the next thing in my life, in fact, that I plan to do.
Wow. Thank you. Anam, I think you're next. You can pose your question.
Thank you, Es, for putting this together. Patrick, my question is related to costs that you spoke to. So what happens at a point, or what's your view about letting go of a dead horse at a point in time where you need to readjust because of costs?
Look, I'll be honest with you. I think it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So what is it called? It's called the sunk cost fallacy. They do this a lot in businesses. Businesses will invest in a project and, they'll spend $1 million, and then the project's not quite working, so they'll spend another $1 million. And it's basically throwing good money after bad. And you'd generally find that you'll be much better off if you cut your losses and make the switch. Now, none of this is financial advice. I'm not authorized to give any, but I believe in doing the right thing and doing the right thing immediately. So, if I'd bought, let's give you an example. I bought, when I was still thinking I could pick companies, because obviously I'm so smart, and I spent time reading up about them. And so at one stage I owned MTN, and I bought it at, I can't remember, 150 Rand a share. And, it had been going up and up and up over all these years. And for some reason that changed when I bought it, and it ended up going down and down and down. And it got to the point where it was 100 Rand a share. And, as you were saying, I had two options. I could either sit and wait for it to come back to 150 Rand a share, or I could sell it immediately and put it into, at that stage it was unit trust, but let's call it an index. And I sat and I thought and I did a bit of reading, and I came across this whole sunk cost fallacy, and everything in my mind was telling me, cut your losses and do the right thing with your money. And I tried to imagine, what would I do right now if I hadn't invested any money? So let's say I'd gotten to the point where MTN was 100 Rand a share, but I owned nothing of it. Would I think it's the right investment to make? And at that point, I'd already learned that indexing is the way to go. And so my answer was no, I wouldn't buy it at that stage. I would put my money in the index. So to me, the answer was also the same thing. If I wouldn't buy it right now, why would I hold it right now? And I'd sold out of MTN. I bought the index fund or the unit trust at that stage. And it turned out to be the right thing to do, because, the unit trust or the index funds and that, they went up and up and up generally. And I think MTN dropped even a little bit further. So with hindsight, it was the right thing to do, but also in my philosophy, it was the right thing to do.
Thank you.
The JSC guy, Tabang, you're up. You're up next.
Oh, good evening. Good evening, as and the listeners. Oh, hi, Patrick. And thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, it's quite inspirational. I just wanted to ask, in terms of choosing your index funds or ETFs, what do you consider? Is it costs or locations or sectors?
Yeah, and it's pretty easy. So I don't choose a sector. I want to buy the whole world. So I look for an all-world index fund, and then I look at costs. So the first thing for me is sort of the most broad spread, but I won't do anything stupid. Like I wouldn't buy, if I've got one index fund that costs me 0.2 and it's got 7,000 shares in it, and the other one costs me 0.8, but it's got 8,000 shares into it, I will probably go for the lower cost first. But I wouldn't go to sort of ridiculous levels. So I wouldn't invest in an index fund that's only got like 300 shares in it because it's at 0.1. So in that case, I'll go for the better diversification. It's a bit of a balancing act. I don't have a hard and fast rule, but those are the only two things I look at, is diversification and cost.
Okay. And second, do you have any individual stocks?
I don't, not a single one. I literally only own index funds, and I literally only own all world index funds. And it's only the three I've mentioned, and it's going to be 4 when I start buying the core shares, all world index. I used to own Coronation Fund Managers, which, I bought at, I can't remember, 70, 80 Rand, and it went all the way up to 160, and I was feeling hugely intelligent and thinking I'm the smartest investor around. But unfortunately, I hung on to it until it went all the way back down again, and I think I sold it out for pretty much what I bought it for. And it was humbling. I realized I'm not smarter than everyone else in the world. So I just buy index funds. The thing about buying an individual share, is you're actually, to buy a share, somebody else has to be selling it. And what you're thinking of is you think, I'm going to buy this because the price is going up. And the guy selling it is thinking, I'm going to sell this because the price is going to go down. And it's, they call it a zero-sum game. Eventually one of you is going to be right and one of you is going to be wrong. And that's all the stock market really is. It's a zero-sum game, but then you add in costs. So the investment companies would love that. They'd love to see everyone swapping shares with everyone else continuously. We'd all make the average and they would get all their...
Sorry, Patrick, I just muted you by mistake. Please just unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Sorry, okay. Where did you lose me?
Where you were just explaining about the index funds.
Okay, yeah. So I think I mentioned that, when you're buying a share, you're buying it thinking the price is going up, and somebody else is buying it thinking the price is selling it thinking the price is going down. And, one of you is right and one of you is wrong. But what the investment companies want you to believe is that you can be smarter than everyone else. And the problem is, it's a battle of the brains, and you're competing with people that do this professionally and they get it wrong. So your chances as an individual investor are virtually zero. You're not going to be the smartest person around. You might get lucky once or twice, but in the end you won't. There's an interesting theory, which I do believe in. It's called the efficient market hypothesis. If somebody feels like doing some really boring reading, you can go and look up what the efficient market hypothesis is. But to sort of summarize it, it basically says that everything we already know is priced into the value of a share. So, you might think now Amazon is a fantastic business, and I agree, Amazon is a fantastic business. But we both know that Amazon is a fantastic business, which is why the share trades at such a high price to earnings ratio. And you might think that, let's think of a bad company now. Which company is doing badly? I don't know. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to say, you might think, okay, well, now airlines are in trouble. So I'm going to sell out airlines because, nobody's traveling, COVID's around. The problem is the whole world knows airlines are in trouble. So the price of the airlines has already gone down. So the efficient market hypothesis is basically everything we already know is already taken into account, which means that it's impossible to buy anything cheaper than it should be. It's also impossible to sell anything for more expensive than it should be. And all we should literally do is realize that the market is perfect and that everything is valued at a fair price and buy everything.
Interesting. Hlubi, you're up next. Please unmute yourself. Just ask the question.
Thanks, Ez. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Hlubi.
You mentioned that you are 41.
42.
42. Okay. For
Yeah.
someone starting, let's say someone is starting at that age, they've only started now with their investment journey, and they have a horizon of about 15 years until retirement. But they're also trying to reach financial independence. What would your advice be to that person?
Thanks. So the rules for how long you need to save stay the same. So if you're starting today and you save 50% of your salary, you're going to have enough money in 17 years to never need to work again. Now, sure, it would have been great if you started 17 years ago, but we can't turn back the clock. So you almost have to start again. Basically, you look at how much time you've got, and that will tell you how much of your money you need to save for. So I've got this little table which I worked out a while ago. So if you said you've only got 15 years, that means you need to save 54% of your income. So it's not going to be easy, but literally, if you save 54% of your income in 15 years, you'd reach that point. Now, the only way to do that is probably going to be to cut expenses fairly drastically. And to put all your money away and just start saving and saving. There's no shortcuts, unfortunately. You can't say, well, I've got a shorter time period, I better earn better returns, because the returns are going to be what the market is going to give you. If you take a shortcut and if you try and say, okay, well, I'm going to try and put my money into solar panels or blueberries or Bitcoin or something like that, you might get lucky, and a lot of people have, but you might literally put yourself behind where you are today. So the only thing you can do is save as much as you can and just keep putting it away and keep putting it away and just do it over time. It feels pretty boring at the beginning. In fact, I always say the best investing is boring because it's like planting a tree. You literally put seeds in the ground, you water it, and the rain does the job for the next 15, 20 years, and you come back and there's this great big tree and you can sit in the shade. And that's investing. I mean, literally you're putting these seeds into the ground and you add a little bit to them whenever you've got money, and you come back 20 years later and it's a miracle what happened. I mean, if I look at my investment account, I've probably put in half the amount of money and the market has done the rest, so I've been given back 100% of what I've put in, which is great.
Pinky, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Ace. Thank you, Patrick, for coming on and for the opportunity. So I've got a couple of questions, but I just want to lead with, if we are being realistic and honest with ourselves, the average South African cannot save 50% of their salary when they start working.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's a known fact.
Yeah.
So that's one we must accept, and I would like you to address that. As an average South African, I start working, I have 60, 70, 90. I know people that started working with 150,000 rands worth of student debt.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
And where part of that debt or those loans is not only for their degree, it's loans that they took out to support their families when they were students.
Yeah.
And when they start working, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know the exact stats now, but in South Africa, the average person that works supports 6 other family members.
Yeah.
So let's just be realistic. I'd just like you to unpack that. You reached FI, which is awesome. I mean, it's a commendable feat. There aren't a lot of people that have reached it at such a young age. But I would like us to have an honest discussion, especially with so many people that are currently on this space. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I know you love ETFs. Obviously, you seem to have, but however, even with your ETFs, you seem to have a very low risk approach to investing.
Yeah.
You go for Vanguard.
I go
Vanguard
for the all world
funds.
funds.
Yeah, one of my favorites. But there are ETFs that have outperformed Vanguard. Yes, I do agree that we need to look at costs, but you've been investing for, since I was in school. So,
okay.
I mean, would you, if you look back, do you think you could have reached FI sooner?
I could have.
If you were a bit of a more moderate risk investor?
Okay, good questions. I like them both. Okay. Look, I mean, you're right. A lot of people do find it hard to save a lot of money. So when I was, I was a professional. I went to university. I was fortunate enough. My mother worked for a university, so I didn't have massive student loans because they comp the fees. But it's a huge advantage in my part. I know most of my friends in that who had big student loans and things like that. I think one of my friends had 150,000 rand yet to pay back. Unfortunately, he was an American because a typical American has sort of like $200,000 in student debt, sort of like 2-3 million rand. But I had an advantage. I had a step up. I was also working through university, so I was a waiter. I drove for Mr. Delivery for quite some time. So all my other costs, I managed to save up myself, and I do think it's a good thing. If you can get a job while you're studying and it's not going to affect your marks and that, I think that is a very good thing to do. On saving 50%, obviously I'm talking again about people in relatively professional careers. So, you studied, you finished studying, or you've got into the trades, because trades are actually quite lucrative if you are quite a good tradesman, so plumbers, electricians and that, especially out of South Africa, not as much in South Africa, but they can earn really good salaries. But what I always like to tell people is, look, I mean, everyone says they can't live on 50% of their salary. Everyone. People who earn 200,000 a month say they can't live on 50% of their salary, and people who earn 10,000 rand a month say they can't live on 50% of their salary. But no matter how much you earn, there's probably somebody in this country who earns half of what you do. So when I was my first job and I earned 7,000 a month, there were absolutely people that were earning 3,500 rand a month at the time, and they were getting by. So can you technically live on it? You probably can. Are you willing to live on it is a different question, because it might be very, very hard. So, I think 50% is a great goal to have. But if you can't do it from day one, do the best you can. My recommendation is to, at the very least, try your best to max out your tax-free savings account. As I said earlier, you can't catch that one up. So it doesn't matter how much you earn in future, you can only put 36,000 a year in it. So that's my goal for everyone I speak to is sort of a new employee, and we get a lot of interns in our organization, and that's always my advice from day one. See if you can max out your tax-free savings account. The rest can come as long as you can keep lifestyle inflation in check. You might start on 10% a year, but the next year, because you get an increase, instead of spending your increase, you might bump it up to 15% a year. And then the next year, you'll get a nice big increase, and they'll give you a bonus that year. And maybe it bumps you up to 22, 23, 24%. And as long as you can keep lifestyle inflation in check and you are working really hard and you're advancing in your careers, you're probably going to get to a point where 50% isn't a stretch. And it isn't really huge to get to. So that would be my goal, is do what you can. The nice thing is that if you're aiming for 50% and you fail and you get to 20%, you're probably better off than 90% of South Africans. You're probably better off than 90% of the world. So I think that's a good thing to do. What was your other question? Could I have reached earlier if I was more aggressive? So again, I'm going back to this whole, you can be aggressive, you can try and pick sectors, you can try and pick companies, but by doing all of that would be saying that, the world has missed something. I'm the only person that's seeing that this sector is going to go much further. And I tried and failed. It could just be that I'm not smart enough. But the way I could have actually reached the point significantly earlier, and for me it would have been quite a few years earlier, was if I didn't keep money in a bank account doing nothing. So if I'd started from the word go and I invested all my money into index funds, I would have been probably 2, 3, 4 years ahead of where I was. Personally, I was a terrible property investor, so if I skipped that bit as well and went straight into index funds, I would have made more money there too. So for me, if I had to go all the way back to the beginning and do it again, I would do exactly what I'm doing now, but I would do it from day one.
Hey, guys, if you want to ask Patrick any questions, please request to be a speaker. Patrick, who are the investment philosophers that have influenced your investment philosophy?
Look, I don't know too many of them. I do love Warren Buffett and his quotes, and that I think he's a really, really smart guy. For every rule, there's the exception to the rule, and Warren is one of these exceptions. So the rule basically says that none of us are smart enough to beat the index, but Warren did it for nearly 20 years. He's actually lost out in the last few, but he's managed really well. And I just like the things he says, he'd rather buy a great company at a fair price than a poor company at a great price, things like that. So he's quite a hero of mine, and I could spend a few hours reading his quotes, and it's a lot of fun. But I could never do what he did. He was a one-off. In fact, he advises most people to just buy the index and leave it like that. And when he dies, his wife's money, and that is all tied. Well, the money he's not giving away because he's giving away 98% of it. But the money that's left over for his wife and his family is all going into index funds because he also thinks that there's no way to beat them over the long term. And I'm not sure if he thinks he got lucky, but he did it for a while. And then I spoke about Jack Bogle, who's the guy who invented the index fund. And he's got a great following of people. They call themselves the Bogle heads. And they literally just believe in doing the right thing over a long period of time, and the rest just happens for you. So I do like those two guys. In terms of the bloggers I followed, it was actually Mr. Money Moustache that sort of opened my eyes to all of this because, I thought you had to be smart and pick companies, and I thought you had to be able to find the best unit trust manager in that. And I think it was some of his articles that first said, literally it's possible not to spend what everyone else is spending. So he was a huge motivator in sort of frugality. I was fortunate. I think I'm quite naturally frugal, but he just writes things so well, that you can look at the numbers of doing things, like look at the number of owning a new car every 4 years and how much it builds up to. And I thought that was a great calculation to do. And look at how much money you're spending on getting to work and back. It's great to live in a really nice suburb, but if you're spending 2 hours a day in the car and you work out what those 2 hours are worth to you in the end, that tells you a lot. So I did like his early blogs a lot. I don't read too much anymore because I think he's covered pretty much everything I wanted to learn in the early days, and his new stuff is sort of aimed at really wealthy people, what it's like to give away $100,000 and that. But I still think he's a great guy, and he's opened the world's eyes to this whole, you don't need to follow the pattern. You don't need to study for 20 years, work for 40 years, and then try and retire for another 5-10 years. That you can actually flip those numbers onto their head. You can study for 20, work for 20, and enjoy a 40-year retirement very easily if you wanted to. Or you can work incredibly hard and save incredibly well for 10 years, like some people do. There's a couple of teachers on his forum. I can't remember the names right now, but they're two teachers, so they're on teacher's salary, which in America is like in South Africa, it's not very good. And they basically just kept their apartment the same as while they were studying. And in 10 years on a teacher's salary, they managed to reach financial independence, and they actually did retire. So they weren't just pretending. But yeah, it's achievable for pretty much anyone. I do always say America is probably the best country in the world to do this, because it's possible to earn a very high salary there, and it's possible to live on very low costs. I used to say, up until quite recently, that South Africa was probably the second best country in the world to do it, because there are people in South Africa earning monstrous salaries, and you can, as a professional, earn a very big salary. But there's also people that are living incredibly, on very low salaries, so it's possible to live very, very low cost here. Unfortunately, our economy is not quite what it was 5-10 years ago. But if you can get a high-paying job in South Africa now, you are very, very well set.
Any books recommendations that you would recommend for people that are interested in following this route of retiring early, and not just waiting for retirement for them to consider retiring?
It's one of my favorite blogs to read. I'm just going to find it for you. The guy's name is Jim Collins. His website is jlcollinsnh.com. Now, he writes really well about the stock market, and I think it's some of the best stock market writing, and it really does help. In fact, it helped me a lot, sort of clear things up on, stock markets going up and down, and how not to take notice of it, and how things are going to happen regardless. I don't know if I can post links, but I might send it to you later, or I'll link it in one of my blog posts. Jim Collins' stock series, if you read that, is the best stock series out. He's also written a book called The Simple Path to Wealth, and I love it. I think it's brilliant. It's a really good common sense book. Unfortunately, it's based on the American stock market, so you've got to take the theories and not buy the exact index funds he does, because Americans are taxed differently. But it's, in fact, you don't even really need to buy the book. Go and read his stock series on the website, and you'll come to the conclusion that, the stock market is going to go up, and you need to buy as much of it as possible. Very good book. I did, in a competition, win Jack Bogle's book. I'm trying to remember what it was. This Jack Bogle. So I'm Googling while I'm talking. The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. And it was very nice reading, and I was a big fan of Jack Bogle, and I'm very glad I owned the book. But I got through it. It makes sense. It's all very easy, but it was stuff I knew at the time, so I didn't read too much of it. It probably is a great book. In fact, if somebody wants the book, I'm willing to give it to anyone on a loan, provided that when you're finished with a loan, you pass it on to somebody else. So maybe we can let the listeners make a play for it and see who wants to get the book next. But Jim Collins' stock series, well worth the reading, and he's a great writer, and it's quite funny. And his book is also very good if you do feel like buying a book that you can read, not online. It is very nice.
Just as a side note, in terms of what Patrick is saying, a little trick I've learned is that on YouTube, if you go to Google Talks on YouTube, there's an investment series that they have there, and they usually cover a lot of the books, investing books, where they're talking to a lot of the Google employees, and they basically cover some of the investment topics like value investing, the common sense, the little common sense books. So if anyone is on this Twitter Space. Just go to YouTube, click on Google Talks. There's a lot of investing talks that they do at Google that I've found very useful, that I've used quite often. So if you're unable to buy the book, there's a lot of the discussions that they hold there.
That's great to know. I'm learning from you as well. It's great. Yes, thanks.
I want to open the floor for any other questions that anyone might have. Please send me a request. And if not, then we'll be wrapping up the session. Patrick, thank you so much for coming through. I think for me, as someone who looks forward to this journey that I'm on to financial freedom, having heard your story and how you started, and the fact that, you didn't have a lot to start off with, but you managed. I mean, you said it took you 17 years to reach your, financial independence, gives me hope. I know I definitely don't have the 50%, but I'm definitely maxing out my tax-free savings account, and I'm hoping in the next few years I'll also be where you are. So thank you for, paving the way, especially from a South African context, because I think in the US there's a lot of people who've reached financial independence, but you don't hear a lot of South Africans that have managed to do it. I don't know if you know any other ones that have managed to reach financial independence.
I do, actually. There's a couple on, I've done a post on them before, Andre and Lisa. They were 36 and 46, both of them, when they sort of reached the point, and also not big salaries. I think he was working at a university. And they did it. They took a year or two off, and they went campervanning across Europe. So I like to chat to them. They're quite active on the Fat Wallet group on Facebook, and they haven't gone back to work. They just haven't traveled as much now because of COVID. But they're the only other couple that I know of that's reached that point. I'm sure there's more. They're probably just quiet. I don't know if like me, I'm actually naturally a bit of a shy person, so this is always a bit of a challenge to me, doing podcasts and stuff like that. I do quite like it. I do like to share, and I do like to tell a few stories, but naturally I'm shy, and I'm sure a lot of the other people that are in this position are there because, they haven't spoken about it, but they've just sort of worked away and done the right thing for a very long time.
Amo, I see you wanted to say something.
Oh yes, thank you. Thank you. Patrick, I don't know if you touched on this. I just wanted to find out, since you have reached your financial independence, are you still working? Are you still saving
it's a great question.
50%? Yeah, are you still saving your 50%? When are you planning to completely retire? And what kind of challenges have you encountered along the way to your independence?
It's a good question. So a lot of people ask me, why are you still working? And to be quite honest, the only reason I'm still working is because my job transitioned from what I was doing into my dream job. I've always loved gadgets and drones particularly. And my employer, recently gave me, a few million rand and said, find out how drones can improve the world. And that's basically my job at the moment, is it's kind of like R&D and trying to figure out how drones can make the world a better place. So it's a great job and I love it. And I go to work every day. Well, I don't go to work at the moment because I'm working from home, but it doesn't feel like I'm working. If I'm standing in a dusty field teaching people from a national disaster management agency how to use drones to predict where floods are going to go, for me, it's fun. It's not work. Or if I'm trying to figure out how drones can provide internet access to places that have been flattened by a cyclone, or if I'm trying to count the number of houses affected by a cyclone using drones, I don't see it as work. So I'm loving what I do, and as long as I'm loving what I do, I can keep doing it. I'm still saving a huge amount of money, and the nice thing is once you reach your financial independence, your net worth actually grows much more rapidly, because now you've got your investments basically, putting in virtually as much money as your salary. So I mean, you're almost investing twice as much as you were to reach that point. So as long as I'm loving my job, I'll keep doing it. But the minute I stop loving it, I'll go and do something I enjoy more. So this is the last job I'm going to have. It's the last time I'll spend in an office, or at least the last type of job I'll do is the drone work. It looks like it's going to continue because I think it's a field that's growing. But as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll carry on. But I do kind of have a deadline. I don't want to work forever and start sailing around the world when I'm too old to pull those lines and things like that. So I'm kind of setting a deadline for 45, but it might be sooner. So we'll see how it goes.
My question, Patrick, is was your wife on this journey as well? Or did you have to convert her? How did you do it as a couple?
She's sitting behind me, but I think she's fallen asleep, so I can speak openly. So when I met my wife, it was actually quite funny. We met on Tinder, which is the way people meet nowadays, I guess. But this was way back in the days when Tinder was starting. So I had to actually, I don't know if anyone else has realized this, but there was a time when you could actually run out of people on Tinder. I believe now it's almost like limitless. Anyway, I met my wife, and she was quite a big earner and quite a big spender. So she was on a completely different path to the one I'm on. She had a really big, impressive apartment and expensive wardrobe and drove a fancy little car. So not quite what I expected. And she liked me because I was confident, and even though I didn't have a lot of money, or at least she thought I didn't have a lot of money. And she started buying me lots of clothes because obviously looking at the car I drive and the clothes I've got, I must be very, very poor. And I'm aside from being quite frugal, I'm also a minimalist. I don't like having lots of stuff. I feel that your stuff owns you. You don't own your stuff. I think you realize that when you start moving house every now and then, that you've kind of got the stuff which is an anchor. Anyway, so I'm a minimalist, and she started buying me clothes, and eventually I had to tell her, actually, I've got a fair amount of money. And when we got to know each other better, I sort of disclosed exactly how much I had, and she was blown away because she out-earned me. But she had nowhere near the amount of money I did. And slowly but surely, I didn't try and change her because we weren't married at the time, and I don't think you should try and change people. But I just kind of showed her what the possibilities were, and she just started adjusting. The one thing that worked for her was the fact that we went on a couple of these holidays, and I think it was after the cycling holiday. We cycled across Europe, and I think I said to her at the end, I would love to spend a couple of years doing this. And she said, of course you did. Everyone would love to spend a couple of years on holiday, but we just can't. And I said, well, actually you can. You just need to have enough money invested. And, like most people, she thought this was an impossibility. But I showed her the maths and I explained the numbers, and I said, it's 300 times your monthly expenses and you're literally done. And to her, it was a monstrously huge number because she was a big spender. And then I kind of showed, well, you don't actually need to spend that much. You can probably significantly cut down if you stop upgrading cars a lot. And turned out she liked the idea, and she liked the idea of going on a permanent holiday at some point. So she stopped buying new cars. So she's got the same car that she had when I met her now. And last year she sold her apartment, which was a really big apartment, 250 square meter apartment. And we've moved into a small loft apartment, which we absolutely love. So it's got just a loft bedroom and a nice living area downstairs. And it's everything that we need, but no more. And it's got a great big garden outside. But her expenses dropped from, living in a big, expensive apartment. She must have been spending 25K a month down to 7K a month. So all of a sudden, this extra money is getting invested. And for a couple of years, she's actually managed to save more than I do, which I think is very, very impressive. And it's great having her on our side. I think if she hadn't changed, it would have made life a bit of a challenge. It would have made life much more difficult trying to save, living in a very big, expensive apartment. It would have made life much more difficult trying to keep up with the Joneses. And to let you in on a secret, the Joneses actually really don't care. Nobody really cares about how much money you spend. But they are quite jealous if you've got a really big investment account. So yeah, she's on board, and it is quite fantastic. We're trying to decide now whether our first bit of nomadic life should be a really nice camper van traveling around Europe by land, or a small boat which we can anchor off, all the nicest ports for free over the next few years. So we haven't quite figured it out yet. We'll probably end up doing both, actually, but just in different periods of our lives.
I like that. The trick is to take them on holiday so they see the possibilities.
Hey, look, everyone would love to be on holiday, for the rest of their lives. It's a very easy sell.
Pinky, you said you had a question. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Ace. I think somebody was trying to ask a question. Someone asked it on their behalf. Gilles, I don't know if you're still here. So she's also in Ireland, and I remember in a previous interview you said, I don't know if you're still in Ireland, but you were in Ireland. Which broker are you using? And just generally, what are the tax implications of a South African that's investing through an Irish broker? Are you still a tax resident of South Africa? I think we all want to know, because we're all scared of SARS, and 1 July is 2 days away.
Yeah, okay. Look, those are great questions. Those are quite advanced questions. And so I've never been in Ireland, but I've invested through Ireland. But okay, so this gets a little bit complicated. So I live in South Africa, and I pay tax in South Africa. And please pay all your taxes. Don't hide things from the receiver. It's going to bite you sort of really badly. So anyway, give the South African government what they need. So I invest in an Irish-based index fund because Ireland has got very good business ties with the rest of the world. So Ireland pays very little tax to everyone else in the world. But when my dividends get paid out, I declare on my SARS form that I got paid, 200,000 rand in dividends or whatever it is, and I pay tax on those dividends. So the broker I use is actually an American broker. So they're called Interactive Brokers. There's a few really good American brokers. I've got a post on my blog called Investing Properly Offshore in 3 Easy Steps. So it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where the broker is. It matters where the fund lives. And so the fund I buy lives in Ireland. And because of that, it falls under the Irish rules. The only thing that you can never escape is your own taxes. So SARS is going to get you, regardless of where the fund is based. So I use Interactive Brokers. The other good one is TD Ameritrade, but it'll only let you buy in America, which is fine because you can buy Vanguard World in America quite nicely. America is marginally better tax-wise than Ireland if you're a South African citizen, because both of them, with the Irish fund, they take off taxes and then they give you dividends. With the American fund, they give you dividends and then they take off taxes. But the benefit of the American way is the American gives you the dividends, then they take off taxes, but you can claim those taxes back from the South African receiver. Whereas with the Irish fund, they take off the taxes first and then they give you dividends, and you can't claim that back. Now, the difference is really, really small. I mean, it works out to like 0.05% a year. But it would make a tiny little difference. And if you like things to be optimal, you will sort of try and make them optimal. So if I knew I wasn't going to die, I would have all my money in America. But the fact that I can't say that means that I'll only keep $200,000 in America and everything else goes to Ireland. I hope that answers it. Was there a second part to the question? I'm trying to remember.
Has your question been answered?
You've sort of answered it, Patrick. Thank you. But then I've got a follow-up, if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Is in kind of a hurry. Sorry. We are used to doing 3 and 4 hour spaces, so it's still early.
Okay.
Okay, so you are actually using Interactive Brokers.
Yeah.
So what I want to know is, you initially said you obviously a big fan of Bogle, you're investing in Vanguard. Are you investing in a feeder fund?
No, so the Vanguard, you can buy the Vanguard funds in 2 ways. So a feeder fund is generally when they put a wrapper around it. So
Yes.
like the Core Shares fund is a Vanguard feeder fund. Now, okay, this gets even more tricky. Did you know, and I assume most of you don't, that if you invest your money outside of South Africa, you pay less taxes than if you invested in South Africa? Now, this is crazy.
No,
It shouldn't
we
be
are
that
aware
way.
of that. We are aware of
Yeah.
that. I'm a big offshore investor, but I'm just trying to understand because it's not as complicated as you make it seem, but it seems to be quite a lot of admin.
Okay, yeah, it's not. It's actually really easy. I mean, okay, let's break it down to rules. Put your first $200,000 into TD Ameritrade and buy the Vanguard index fund in America. Simple. When you get to $200,000, move it all, or move anything else, or move your next 100,000 into Interactive Brokers, because Interactive Brokers doesn't charge you a monthly fee once you got $100,000, and buy the Irish fund, and that's it. It's that simple. So by investing offshore, and you'll know this, but I'm not sure everyone else will know, you pay less in dividend taxes because they exempt some of your dividends against your income. So the only time you'll pay 20% dividends tax in an offshore fund is if you're in the 45% tax bracket, but most of us are not. So we pay significantly less dividends tax offshore. And you also pay less capital gains tax if you invest offshore because the rand depreciates much faster than the dollar or the euro or the pound. And most of our capital gains tax, and I hate capital gains tax, it's my worst, it's because it isn't actually capital gains tax. We're actually paying tax on inflation. And the government is causing inflation, and then we're paying tax on it. So I really don't like it. So capital gains aren't indexed for inflation. So the faster the currency depreciates, the more capital gains tax you'll pay. And that's why I take all my money offshore. It's not because I want to buy the whole world or I want to buy an index fund that's not available in South Africa. It's literally just because if I take my money offshore, I'm going to pay less tax overall than if I kept my money in South African ETF based on offshore holdings.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. Sorry that I'm taking over. I think this will probably be my last question. I hope this is my last question. So you're very big, obviously, on ETFs, and I respect that, of course, because not all of us have got time to sit and go and analyze, what is going on with the stock and all of that.
Yeah.
But even with ETFs, I mean, 15 years ago, there weren't that many South African ETFs. There was
very few.
Satrix, some core shares. But we have over 100 now, and a lot of them are obviously very close in terms of their tracking difference, very close to some of the international funds as well as the index that they will be tracking. So currently, do you reassess what the ETFs specifically that you're invested in? Do you check again? Do you check the competitors, the performance, the tracking difference? Because fees is one thing, but you also want to know that the performance is worth the fees. I mean, if I'm paying 0.1, it's fine, but I would rather pay 0.25 and get a much better performance and less tracking difference to the index over X period of time.
Yeah, I'll be honest, you're a more advanced investor than I am. But I do know that tracking differences do make an impact. I check on my Vanguard funds, which are in America, and their tracking is so close that it's virtually I'm getting the index. In fact, some of them even do some weird things in the background where they kind of short their index shares, or they short the shares they're holding to people who want to rent them out to make money when share prices go down. And they actually perform better than the underlying index, which is very rare, but they're cheap enough that they can do that. In terms of the South African ones, I'll be honest, I don't check very often. I used to check for a while when there were different ETFs, like if you look at the top 40 index in South Africa, there's probably about 4 or 5 different places you can buy it now, and they all have slightly different costs. But you're right. If one has got a cost of 0.1, but they miss out on tracking by 0.3%, that's a problem. Whereas if another one's got 0.2, but they track virtually perfectly, they're going to be better. I haven't looked recently. And like I said, I had the Satrix All World Index, which is the one I've been using. I have no idea how well it's been doing on the tracking. Costs are low. I believe it'll be very good because it's a wrapper fund, and I think the underlying fund for that is a fund from BlackRock. But the new one, the Core Shares Total World Stock Feeder Fund, I think is based on the Vanguard All World Index, and I know that one tracks incredibly well. So I'm going to buy that without any sort of hesitation. But I think if you were a person, and I'm not, if you were a person who likes to pick sectors and that, then they need to take into account things you're talking about, sort of how, what does the fund cost and what is the tracking error and things like that.
Patrick. I don't see any other requests for anyone to be made a speaker. Patrick, where can people read about your investment blog? I know your blogs helped me quite a lot. Please share with us where people can get hold of you, how they can read your blogs.
Okay, so my blog site is investorchallenge.co.za. You can click on a link there. There's a link to all the posts I've written. I've stopped writing recently for a couple of reasons. The first is I've been really, really busy at work, which is, because it's fun, I've been doing it. The second is because I got into a bit of trouble for making too many jokes at politicians' expenses. I've got a sort of very low threshold for enduring corrupt politicians, and it wasn't always taken very well. But I will pick up blogging again at some point. But I've covered most of the major topics I've wanted to cover. If something new comes up that I think is worth writing about, I'll cover it again. And then I'm on Twitter. I'm not a huge tweeter, but I do write the odd comment, and I think people can see my Twitter handle over there. It's TravelBugBitten. And I do like, if people ask me questions, I do like to respond. The one thing I won't do is I won't give any financial advice. So if you ask me a specific question, I'm not qualified to answer it. But if you want to know my philosophy on something, I'm more than happy to share my philosophy.
I think Anam and the JSE guy, I don't know if you were raising your hands to ask something or you were just in agreement with what was being discussed.
Yeah, on my part, I just want...
Okay, sorry, Anam, go first and then the JSE guy.
Okay. Patrick, does an emergency fund have a place now that you've reached financial independence?
So it does. I mean, it's also another good question. The fact is that your emergency fund is there and it's got to be quite liquid. So you need to be able to get the money really quickly. If your kid needs to go to hospital and your credit card for some reason gets stolen or something like that and you need to draw up on cash, you need to be able to get cash quickly. So I have anywhere between 3 and 6 months expenses in my emergency fund. It sort of differs because I like to take money offshore in sort of 100,000 Rand increments. So sometimes I'll drop it down to 3% when I've just taken another 100,000 offshore. But you do need to have one. It is a must. The fact that I could get a whole lot of money quickly by selling shares, it's still going to take me a few days to get into the country. So that's not the answer for an emergency fund. The other reason is that, you get what's called a sequence of events, a sequence of, I'll have to think of the name. Anyway, a bunch of bad events happening one after the other. So, if you look at when the stock market crashed in March, April, May last year, if I had an emergency and I had to sell shares at that point in time, I would be selling at a really low price. It would be a really bad thing to do. But if I had an emergency and I had a good emergency fund based on something cash-like, then I could just draw on that. So if anyone's interested, my emergency fund sits in Time Bank, and I've put it in one of those Time Bank high interest earning accounts. It's not as high as it was. At one point it was 9%. I think it's down to 6 or 7% now. But that's where my emergency fund sits, and I can get it out virtually instantly if I need it.
JC guy?
Thank you. Yeah, as we wrap up, just last question. Seeing that the world is transitioning towards a cleaner economy and technology and carbon emissions, what's your take on ESG?
Sorry, can you just repeat the last bit? I didn't get. What's your take on?
ESG funds.
Are you talking about clean energy funds or things like that?
Yeah, so ESG funds, they look at environmental, how companies are.
Okay. Look, I love the idea. I think it's great that people have the opportunity to support businesses that are working in sort of the the cleaner space. I still think it would be picking an economy. If I had, a lot more money than I ever thought I needed, I would definitely back that. In fact, it's something I've considered quite a lot. Do I want to invest in a cleaner economy, basically letting my money steer the way I want the world to go? I like the idea. I haven't done it yet. I might do it actually, because I have got a little bit of money sitting around that I could consider play money or planning money to make a difference. It's probably not enough as an individual to do that, but I think if the whole world decided that the earth should be a cleaner place, and we're only going to support companies that are doing that, I think the world would be a better place. So maybe you're right. Maybe I need to start letting my money speak for me. But I haven't yet, I'll be honest.
All right, thanks.
One last question from me, and then we're closing it. So I hear you've started saving for investing for your son. How do you feel about, maxing out his tax-free before he knows what it is? I think that's the biggest thing as a parent that I've been sort of in two minds. I've started investing, but I haven't really done it in a tax-free for them, purely because I've been sitting on the fence around this.
It's a tough one, eh? I mean, look, I'll be honest. I'll tell you, my son, who's 14 now, has got a tax-free investment account with about 340K sitting in it. And this means that when he turns 18, and I'm going to keep maxing it out every year, the investment account in the next 4 years is probably going to be north of 500,000 Rand. And legally, this money is going to be his. And the only thing I can do is I can only just hope that I've educated him enough to know that this isn't me giving him a lot of play money, but it is literally me buying him his retirement. And that's what I've done. I've basically taken his retirement worries away from him, so that no matter what he does in life, when he turns 65, if he doesn't touch this fund, or if he puts more money into it, he's not going to have to worry about retirement. And it's going to be a fantastic, big tax-free retirement. Just to give you, I do love these tax-free accounts because they grow faster than anything else, because everything else is tax involved. But let's say, for instance, you were to fall pregnant and you're going to have a baby in 9 months' time. And you start scrimping and saving and putting away money. I've got a post about this somewhere. If you put 1 year's worth of tax-free allowance into your child's account as they're born, so you've saved it for 9 months, you've basically, for 36,000 Rand, you've bought them their retirement. And it'll just grow and grow and grow and grow. And by the time they reach 65, I think it works out so they can spend 400,000 Rand a year or so, just out of that one little investment. The trick, again, is that legally the money is my son's. And legally, if he wanted to take it out and blow it on, I don't know, cars and boats and cocaine or whatever it would be, legally, well, not cocaine, but legally he could do that. The money would be his. I've just got to hope that I've done my job as a parent and educated him well enough not to.
Looking back, Patrick, would you have started earlier? What are some of the things that you think maybe you'd have done done differently?
Okay, so let's see. I mentioned earlier I would have started investing from day one, so that would have been a big one. I didn't really sort of live as frugally as I could have. I had a car, a love for cars, which my first car I bought was one of the old 3 Series BMWs, which wasn't very expensive because it was very old at the time, and I loved it. But the thing cost me a lot to maintain. And then I stupidly bought an even worse car. I bought an Audi A4, which was also stupidly cheap at the time. It was 40-odd thousand. But literally that car tried to bankrupt me. I think it broke down on average sort of once every 2 months. And for some reason, everything on that Audi cost me at the time 6,000 Rand. So I spent far too much money there. It was only my third car where I decided to do things right and buy a cheap 2-year-old Japanese car and maintain it very well. And that's the car I still have today. So if I could have, those 2 cars probably cost me an extra couple of million together. I could have avoided that, I would have. But otherwise, I didn't do too badly. I mean, I could have skipped the unit trusts and gone straight to index funds. That would have been great. I could have skipped trying to pick shares and gone straight to index funds. I didn't do that right. But this is the big thing, is when you're saving 50% of your salary, the returns aren't as important as your savings rate. When you're saving 10, 15%, the returns are everything. And if you get it wrong when you're saving 10, 15%, it's going to affect you really badly. But at the 50% level, your savings rate is in the beginning, it does change. But in the beginning, your savings rate is much more powerful than your investment returns. It's only sort of towards, after 5, 10, 15 years that your investment returns start dwarfing how much money you can save. Like even now, I save 50% of my salary, but the stock market returns give me way more than that. I mean, it's almost pointless for me saving now because the stock market growth on its own outdoes it completely. Yeah, it's very easy. I mean, I often have days where my investment value goes up. In a single day, it'll go up to 300,000 Rand. There's no way you can save that amount, but stock market growth will win in the end.
Patrick, thank you so much for, taking the time out to answer our questions and just share your journey. It seems, it can be done. I'm really encouraged. I know for sure I'm definitely encouraged to keep going, to stay consistent, and to one day be where you are. If there are no more questions, then we might end the session, unless there's something else from your side, Patrick, before we close.
No, look, thanks very much for having me. To be honest, I love your Twitter feed. I read you quite a lot, and I like the fact that you're trying to educate everyone around, because I think a world in which people saved and looked after themselves and thought about money differently is a better world. I think if people are living sort of paycheck to paycheck, it's very stressful. It makes you do crazy things. You don't think clearly. But if you are in control of your money, I think, if everyone was in control of their money, I think the world would be a much better place. So thanks for all the work you're doing. Yes.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for asking your questions. And with that, good night, good evening, and sleep well. Good night, everyone.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.